In this video, I'm going to show you how to fix a running stitch. This is a stitch that's been dropped several rows before and you've continued knitting on and not realizing that you've dropped a stitch. And what happens is then it creates this thing called a ladder. As you can see here, here's the stitch that got dropped and here's the sort of the rungs of the ladder. And sometimes you have to, because we've continued knitting here, we've sort of close the gap a little bit, but if I pull it out, you can see the rungs of the ladder right here. So the best way to fix this is with a crochet hook. As knitters, you may not necessarily think of needing a crochet hook, but it always helps to just have one. Doesn't have to be any particular size, anything that you can actually use to hook on and pull through the yarn. So I have here a couple different sizes. I'm actually going to use this size G, which is 4.25 millimeter crochet hook. So when it's like this and you're trying to fix this knit stitch that's dropped, you're going to take your needle and insert it here, and what you want to do is you want to start picking up these ladders. So if I turn to the back, you'll see that is my first ladder, right? The one that's hanging off like that. So actually, before I get to that point, let me go ahead and knit up to the point where the stitch has been dropped. So I'm going to knit up to that point right here, right? And this is where we can see we've dropped the stitch. So now I'm going to take my crochet hook and I'm going to insert it into the stitch that's still intact. And I'm going to take this first rung, prop it up like that with the use of my middle finger there, and put the hook and pull it through. And I've picked up the first stitch, drop stitch. And now I'm just going to spread this so that the rest of the rungs are visible and you can see that they're right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have to pick 5 more rungs up. So I'm going to insert and pull through, insert, pull through, and keep doing that. And a couple more to go. It might feel a little bit tight here, especially if you've dropped the stitch and continued knitting on. But you can come up to that point and then slip the stitch onto the needle. Make sure you've slipped it in the right orientation, where the front loop of the stitch is slightly higher than the back loop of the stitch. And there you can see we fixed the ladder. And that's it. You can continue knitting on. And you've just fixed a running stitch on the knit side. Now to fix the same thing, but on the purl side, when you've dropped a stitch and a running stitch, so you have a ladder forming now. To fix this, it's slightly different. So you're going to have your last intact stitch that you can see right here, right? And this first rung of the ladder. So you want to bring that rung of the ladder over that stitch, okay? And actually, I'm going to use the thinner hook here to show you guys this, because it might be a little bit better. Okay, so then I'm going to take my hook and insert it like that into the stitch, and I'm going to hook it onto this ladder, and I'm going to pull that ladder through. So like that. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this next ladder, bring it over the stitch, insert my hook into the stitch, and pull that ladder through. So it's a little bit difficult on this side versus the other one, but it's still doable and not so bad when you use a crochet hook. Now here, when you're inserting your hook, you want to make sure again the stitch is in the right orientation, so it looks like that, and you insert your hook from the back to the front and hook it onto the ladder and pull it through. And so since I've continued knitting, these last 2 ladders are kind of tight. You can see them right here in between, but you can still do that, where you can bring that ladder over the stitch, insert the stitch, hook the ladder on, and pull it through. Okay, now in this case I didn't actually knit up to this point, or purl up to this point I should say, but it might be easier if it gets to that point. It might be easier to actually just purl up to that point. Sometimes I'm so panicky that I'll do this and I'll pick up the stitch even before I knit it, and then I'll put a safety pin or a stitch marker right here to hold the stitch till when I get to the line. So here, this last ladder is now much clearly visible since I've knit up to that point or pulled up to that point. So I could do this, insert my hook and pull the ladder through. There. And I'm going to put it back on my needle, make sure it's in the right orientation, and I can continue purling on, and nobody's the wiser that I had dropped the stitch. I hope you found this video useful. If you liked it, click the like button, subscribe to my channel, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't let mistakes hold you back. We can fix them and we can keep on knitting.